Welcome, everyone, to another episode of A Musician and a Filmmaker, the podcast show where we don't always talk about Animal Collective, but we always talk about Animal Collective. And today, we definitely will be talking a little bit about Animal Collective because we are joined by Geologist, aka Brian Weitz. And as they say, time waits for no man. Brian seems like a pretty patient guy. It's taken a very long time, and here we are with the debut album from Geologist, a Shaw deal in collaboration, kind of, with Sleepy Doug Shaw. Brian, thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I think I've been on before, right? This is my
This is your second.
next
Yeah, welcome back.
episode.
So you're coming back to the show with good reason because you have an album releasing called A Shaw Deal. Tell us a bit about the backstory, how this album came to be, and do you consider this your debut? You put out a couple cassettes before. Do you consider this the debut Geologist album?
I don't think so necessarily, but well, I guess I don't know, but I don't even know if I've made that one yet. Really, I just finished one this week. I think that maybe I would think of it as more that way, but I don't know when that will come out. You heard me play it, Greg, in Texas. The Shaw deal though was more like it was more of a birthday present idea I had, or before it was that even, it was an idea I had for an NTS show. I have a show on NTS too, and I at some point, like it was around 2021, I had the idea because it had been a little while of listening to Doug's Instagram videos. Like in the early days of the pandemic, like sometime in the spring of 2020, someone told me like, "Oh, Doug is gonna go." People were going on Instagram Live and playing impromptu sets from their apartments, and someone told me that Doug was gonna do it. Doug's been a close friend for over 20 years now, and we've toured with him before, and huge fan of his music. So my wife and I listened to it, like we tuned in and we listened to it and enjoyed it. And like I didn't have Instagram back then. I had the Animal Collective account, and the only people we would ever see on our, like if I needed to use Instagram, I just logged into the Animal Collective account. And the only people you ever saw on the feed were who we had followed because we toured with them, and like we had a very weird feed. But he was one of them. And so after we watched that Instagram live set, we saw his feed and that he had been posting these videos, and so every time he posted a new video for the kind of the year after that, they became some of my favorite things to listen to. Like when my kids were on Zooms and stuff for school, and my wife's a teacher, so she was always in her own room teaching her classes over Zoom, and it was up to me to manage the kids, and I couldn't really like put on record. I think my wife might have been teaching in the room where the record player was, so I couldn't like really listen to music, and so I just had listened to stuff off my phone. Doug's like in the 1 minute videos just became some of my favorite things, and I would just hear them as loops almost. And I had the idea for an NTS show where I would take them all and let each one loop for a few minutes to recreate my listening experience and do that. And that was like the first idea. And then the second idea was I could do that, but then I could also make my own transitions to make it more of like a collage piece, but leave his stuff relatively intact. And I never really settled on what I wanted to do with it. And then Animal Collective had to cancel this tour in 2022. That was for Europe, and it was a big bummer. We were all really sad, and it was kind of like a dark time. It was like we just thought like all this stuff would be over by then, all that COVID stress and financial stuff. And Doug's birthday was coming up like a month after that or something, or 6 weeks. I don't remember how long it was, but it was coming up, and somebody said, Doug's kind of bummed that he has his birthday coming up, and he had been toying with this idea of like having this goal of finishing a solo record. And I was like, oh, why? Like, I don't know. I just kind of wondered if like I was like, he's got enough for a solo record, just like off the Instagram. He could just record those. And then I had the idea of like, well, maybe the Instagram like NTS show I could almost make it like just be a little bit more intentional with the collage that I make, and like then just give it to him as a birthday present instead of playing it on NTS. Just give it to him as a birthday present and say like you did make a solo record, you just and it's already out there. Just the pieces had to be reconfigured, and here you go, happy birthday, don't be sad. So that was like the genesis of it. And then I think after that I did it in like I probably like like here and there because Josh and I went to like Guess Who, and there were a few other things I had to do. It probably took me like a week just because I wanted to make it sure I got it done by his birthday. And it's very different than like the original idea. other than the last song, it's not really. It's hard to identify anything as like what he originally played, you know. So
Were
yeah, I
you
just
did you
go
do
home
if you
on
did seven
birthday.
songs, was it a song a day, like for that week?
I don't remember because it's
Okay.
been like that was over 2 years ago now, and again, it wasn't like all in a week, so I might even be wrong about that. But it wasn't much more, and it was usually about a song. Like usually I started something in the morning, and I didn't really have like ideas. I just played around till I made something I liked, and then did an overdub on top of that. But I just made sure that also I didn't let myself use any sound sources other than Doug's Instagram. So like, there's nothing of myself, like none of my nothing of me is on there really. It's just me. Like I wanted to say to Doug, like if you took away everything on this record that's you, it would be complete silence. Like this is like 100%, like everything on here is you at its core. And it's just like going through me as a channel or something.
So there's no
So
hurdy gurdy.
there is no hurdy gurdy. No.
That is surprising because I swear on Loose Gravel it sounds exactly like a hurdy gurdy.
My wife said the same thing when she heard it. She was like, "Oh, like it's cool. I can like recognize a hurdy gurdy now." And yeah, it's not.
You're just
But
able to
that was the
replicate
song.
that with synths,
I mean, again, it's not even sense. It's just like
or
it's
it's
Doug.
just yeah.
Like, I don't quite remember how I made every single one. Like definitely noted down. I made it all on this thing behind me, and I noted down like what the patch was for each one. So like a month ago, Drag City asked me like, "Hey, can you just make a quick video showing how you made at least like one sound on the record?" And like I was able to look through my notes and like get back to it pretty quickly. So this is how I made Route 9 Falls, or at least the first sound that you will hear on Route 9 Falls. Started with the loop just as it was off the phone like this. And I shortened the loop. And I scrubbed until I found a note I liked. And then I started to increase the looping speed. So I could probably do that for loose gravel, but I don't quite know. It's possible that like maybe I had like a snippet of a chord where Doug was playing like a fifth, and I just like took like a split second of it and have it like on like a freeze or something. That would be my guess, but I don't totally remember.
So, like, when you did come up with all these kind of like reimaginations of Doug's guitar playing, and then you finally showed him, like, what was his reaction to it?
Well, I still don't, I'm not even sure he knows like quite how I did it. Like actually, he saw that video because Drag City put it on Instagram, and he was like, "I actually had no idea really what you did to make this record." But I think you guys should talk to Doug because he's a endlessly entertaining person to talk to, way more entertaining than me. He can have you like in smiles for hours. So I'd recommend you talk to him and just talk to him about his music. He's been in White Magic, Gang Dance, played with tons of interesting musicians, and his solo music is beautiful, and we need to hear more of it. So he could probably talk more about it, but I definitely got like a very emotional, thank you, like appreciative, thank you text, because it was kind of, I sent it to him on his birthday, just like, here's a link, and I sent him like a long letter with it, just trying to say some nice things. So,
Send him a free copy of the vinyl.
You know what's funny about Doug Shaw is years ago, I think this was maybe, I want to say like 2017 or something, Gang Dance came to Toronto. Josh opened for Deacon opened for Gang Dance, and I met Doug because he was playing with them, and he was a super nice guy. We hung out a little bit after the show, and then we became Facebook friends after that. And we've been following like all the members of Animal Collective's music for so long, Greg and I, and we've kind of known about you making this kind of birthday record for your friend, but it was never specified who the friend was. So it was only in like a month ago when the single came out where it was like, oh, it was Doug Shaw the whole time. I was like, oh my God, because I, spent a good portion of 2020 also in isolation listening to his beautiful guitar playing videos on Instagram. And I was like, this is amazing. It was a full circle sort of situation. So that was
nice.
pretty awesome.
Yeah, I think I don't know if Drag City sent you guys the copy of the record that had the like the raw material track. Did they?
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
Yeah. So all the entire record is made from however long that is, and I'm not even
It's
sure
like
it's
three
even like
minutes.
all of them. Yeah. So like the rest, the other 25, 30 minutes of the record is like all made from that 3 minute stuff, and that's it, you know. And so, and you know, you can, I think on the record in the artwork, I made like a, with one of the guys at Drag City, we made like a mix and match kind of a graphic. So it shows you in each song like which videos I used, in case anybody wants to go back and dig through
It's
Doug's
good.
Instagram and listen to them and on loop themselves and have the same experience.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk a little bit. It's funny, Greg kind of touched on this, the hurdy-gurdy. So there's no hurdy-gurdy present on this album, but there are sounds that kind of are reminiscent of the hurdy-gurdy. And I'm wondering, like as a musician, do you find, because I think like when I'm listening to like Route 9 Falls, like it's kind of got this rotary quality to it where it feels like there's a crank kind of like operating the sound that's happening in the
Yeah.
same way that the hurdy-gurdy sounds are kind of made. Like is that sound something that you've kind of always tried to go for, and then the hurdy-gurdy was like kind of like a eureka, like, hey, this thing kind of just does that? Is there like a kind of connection between your electronic music versus like that kind of analog hurdy-gurdy?
There was, I never really thought about that, like the rhythmic aspect of it, because like I think maybe what, like if you hear that in my hurdy-gurdy playing, and this doesn't bother me, but like it's a failing of my playing or like a fault of my instrument, because like real hurdy-gurdy, like serious players, like it should, the wheel should be like, and your spinning of it, your cranking of it should be like so smooth that you never hear like the start and the end of the loop. And when I say loop, I mean like the circle you're making with your arm. Like if you differentiate that it's supposed to be with this other piece of wood called the dog that like you make buzz, you know? Like if you listen to traditional hurdy-gurdy music, you'll hear like a buzzing sound, like it's and it's like almost as like a rhythm track. And that's really difficult to do. I can do it, but not well. And I haven't figured out a way to make it fit into my music yet, without it just making me think of traditional playing. I'd love to figure out how to put it in my music, but yeah, it's not working for me yet. So sometimes like I do play a little bit more with like emphasizing just like start and end points, but you're not supposed to hear that. And I didn't think about that with the Route 9 Falls. But I'd have to think more about it. Maybe it's somewhere inside I think about that. It was a bit more like tonally that I heard. I mean, I've loved the instrument for like decades before, but the players that I liked, were always doing more like just intonation stuff with it, like more experimental stuff with it than just like always pure open like fifth drone. So, and I can't remember, like, Greg, I know you and I talked about Isn't It Now? So, I forgive me if I'm repeating myself if we talked about the hurdy-gurdy then too, but
A little bit.
I like, there's one I can't remember which one of these I use for when we play live with John Cale. But I bring some of this stuff, and are you going to post this as a video, or should I say what I'm pointing
Yeah,
to?
go for it.
All right. I'm pointing to my modular system, and I have this one, a couple modules where like it you can make like a fifth, like a harmony to your whatever the oscillator is. And John would always, Dave and I did one particular show with John where it was like like a solo career retrospective thing, and he asked us out on stage for like his early to the part that was going to commemorate the early days, like kind of like when he would jam with Tony Conrad and Lamont Young and Marion Zazalea, and then into the early days of Velvet Underground. And he just wanted me to play a drone, and he would always say like, it was weird. Instead of saying like play like a D and an A, he would just play D and a fifth above D. Like he always talked in terms of fifths. And so I figured it out on my modular, like what he wanted. And then I started doing that in some Animal Collective songs, like a year or so later, like Defeat was one of them that I was like, well, I enjoyed making that drone. And so I was always doing it with synthesizer. And then Dave played me this more traditional hurdy-gurdy player, and it sounded just like the synth patches that I was making. And that was like a thing where I was like, well, for the last few years, I've been always using this synthesized thing to create this sound, but there's this acoustic instrument that I've liked in this other context for a long time. the more like noise experimental stuff that like KG Hano does with it, and maybe I can use it in a more chordal, tonal way that fits in with Animal Collective songs, and that was all why now I don't even do that as much anymore. Now I just kind of play it like it's a guitar or a keyboard or something.
Well, it is interesting how it kind of like is a substitute for your vocals on Isn't It Now, kind of like in the closer King's Walk. You know, every the other three guys are doing their harmony, and then you just sort of have these little accents with the hurdy gurdy.
Yeah.
So it's always kind of going back to that. Mainly just to add on to the rotary thing. I always find it interesting when you guys are able to like unearth these like almost cursed sounds from the way that you sample, like going all the way back to Penny Dreadfuls on Spirit They're Gone, like that sort of zipper sound at the end. The like sort of there's like this sound effect, and I think it's Ripper Call, the third track, where it almost just seems like someone's rubbing their thumb along like a rubber balloon or something.
Uh-huh.
But it's just coming from the synthesizer, and yeah, I mean, do you have like sort of a eureka moment when you're able to kind of unlock something that you had like just from the knobs and the cables and all that?
Yeah, I mean, I can almost like trace a lineage to the sounds you're talking about, and they are very related, and I was aware of it. But I like the sound on Penny Dreadfuls. I'm not on that record. I mean, other than when Noah laid down the drum tracks, nobody was ever around when Dave did that stuff. But I think I know, like when he and I would do some other side project, like hard, we had like a side project at the time, and there was like a feedback kind of system he had just between like pedals and then that sound that you're referring to on Ripper Called is I mean again it's my modular synth, and it's like an envelope kind of a thing. It'd be like, and maybe it's kind of nerdy to explain it, but I always think of that sound and even the sound on Penny Dreadfuls. Like I remember when Dave and I would listen to or watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and we were really into certain sounds, and there was like one particular sound, and like we were talking about like how much we liked it, and we just got like like an old sort of barbershop comb that like hadn't been used too much, so like the bristles were still, or what the teeth of the comb were still pretty like tight and whatever, and just like kind of put it like right up to our ears and like ran our thumbs up and down it, and we were like, that's how you can make that sound. Maybe like put it through a distortion pedal. I mean, we were like 15, maybe 16. I don't know when this. Like I can picture us like playing with this comb and whatever, and how cool that sounded. I guess I can't speak for Dave that like I might be inventing a memory of like that thing on Penny Dreadfuls being related to that same moment, but I think I have it, and the sound on Ripper Called is certainly like related to it.
So when you're writing stuff by yourself, is it like do you need or whenever you write, do you have to like be isolated and like wife and kids out of the room and like total isolation, or is it just kind of like if you're just in the mood, you just pick it up and go, and kind of everything else fades into the background?
I usually have to be isolated. I mean, I kind of am. Like, I'm in Tacoma Park, Maryland right now. I'm just like in this little office above a hardware store that once my kids like got too old to share a room, I got kicked out of the room. We only had one spare room in the house. Like my bedroom, my wife's in my bedroom, my kids had a bedroom, and then we had like an office room, and that was it. Once my kids split up from rooming together, I had to find another place. So it was in some ways, it's like a half an hour drive from my house. But one of the guys he plays electronic music around DC. He was involved with that Beautiful Swimmers record label, and he was like, I work during the day and I use this space during the night. And I was like, well, my kids are at school during the day, and that's when I work, and I need to be home to be on like dinner duty and stuff at night. So like we kind of share this little space. It's not much bigger than what you can see in the Zoom view. There's like, I don't know, like 7 or 8 feet towards the door that way. So now like I have like a practice, like I'm like part of like a carpool in the neighborhood. I have to drop some kids off at school, and then I'm usually here by like 8:30, and I stay until I don't know, 4 or 5, and So that's it's been that way for like 3 years now, and I work really well that way. In the past, it was like at my home, and it worked well there too. But if I had an idea, like I remember when we were working on the Tangerine Reef stuff, I was still working at home, and I generally get my best ideas, or I used to like after 2 or 3 in the afternoon. It takes like a few hours of failing. And I remember like I would sometimes be in the middle of something and then my kids would come home and then we would do dinner and then when they would be getting in the bath or something, because they were much younger then, like getting in the bath, I would be like running back to my bedroom where my work desk was to try something, and I didn't really like that. It was I came up with some of my best stuff weirdly, I feel like during that time, but like that time of day. But I didn't really like the kind of person I was being. I was definitely like, it's a good thing my kids didn't drown, like in the bath, those moments. So I like this better. And I do feel like I really need to be kind of just by myself. Even with that stuff, I think I work best by my like the a lot of times when we do like band writing sessions, I'll make a sound for a certain part that's like in the direction I want to go. But then in between that and either like like the tour or the studio session that's gonna come next, I try and refine it, like because it can take, it's not just like what's the note I'm looking for, or it can take a little bit more attention to detail. So even that stuff I tend to think I work best on my own.
Are you just in like the dark, or do you have any ambient lighting?
Oh, actually, the ambient lighting here rules because I work during the day. Like, if you can, I don't know if like the people listening are seeing this if you put it on YouTube, but this is all ambient. This is like that's highlight is
Oh,
everything.
nice.
Oh,
Um, I only turn the lights on here if it's like we're on a deadline for like a film score and I'm working like past sunset, which is a rare thing. But like you could count the times I actually like flip on the light switch in here in a given year, like on one hand probably.
you've got the real daylight. I'm using a whole bunch of fake daylight over here. But anyway,
Good. Just you gotta. I'm used to this. You gotta do what you gotta do.
Nice. So yeah, going back to a Shaw deal. So there is an interesting kind of like rhythm of the tracks on the album. I feel like the first section kind of hits on some sinister tones, but then it takes kind of like an ethereal turn when we get to the loose gravel track and then into Petticoat. Did you find sequencing this album difficult at all in terms of what kind of emotions are being conveyed by these songs?
No, not really. I mean, I think it was the way I do modular stuff. I get a little self-conscious when I talk about it sometimes, but like because I'm really like. I mean, a lot of people try and like sound like they're spiritual and stuff, and I'm getting more as I get older. But like, I don't like talking like I don't like sounding like a dilettante. But a lot of times, like with modular stuff, like I really just like to see it as like you're just like applying, you're like something being applied to something else. Like there's just energy coming out of the wall. That's like really all that it is, and electricity. And then all you are is like a conduit, and then it like you set up some kind of a process, and then the results that come out the other end are what they are. And if I don't like them, I change them. But like for the cassettes I've done through a Shaw deal, I'd say up until a Shaw deal, this was always my process was like I always have it set up to record. And I usually hit record if I'm like, oh, I've like stopped paying attention. Like if I've set something up and it's going, and then I realize like I haven't touched anything in a while and I've just been listening to it, and then I'm almost removed from the situation. Like my job, I have a friend who is like a Buddhist who I've talked to a lot about this, and he's like he likes how like he says again this for like these tapes and this record, like kind of an end point of my process is when I'm like, all right, now it's just my job to get out of the way. Like I'm not the important thing here anymore, and just get out of the way. And then like I hit record, and I hit record until I've kind of like I start thinking about something else or whatever, and then I'm like, oh, well, then that's maybe how long that's meant to go. And sometimes like, and then I try and honor that, but sometimes things like later on, I'm like, that goes on for that's a bit much, you know. And so that was the hardest thing I think with Shaw Deal was sometimes like kind of honoring like Loose Gravel. I don't always listen to stuff so much like after I'm done with it. And this I finished 2 years ago, and I had a somebody that like Doug and I know in New York because we're gonna put out I think on Monday a visualizer for Loose Gravel. And I had asked him to do something like, again, it wasn't going to be a video, it was just like a visualizer. And he was like, well, that seems kind of boring for a 6 minute song. And I was like, it's not a 6 minute song. And then I had to look it up and I was like, oh, it's pretty close to a 6 minute song. And I had no memory of that. And I hope it doesn't feel too long to people. But I remember thinking more about that with the sequence. And then the first one was pretty easy. Like Route 9 Falls, I knew would be the opener. It kind of opens with the energy. And I think sounds more like what I want it to sound like, which is like it doesn't really sound like any of Doug's videos in itself. To me, it sounds like two guitar players, like almost like electric guitar players, like on a stage, and reminds me of like I mean, it doesn't really like sound like something like a guitar player like Bill Orcutt like would do, but like sort of in that way. The kind of like solo guitar playing I like. And then the Knuckles to Nostrils, like that was like kind of my favorite one when I made it. Just like the energy, it just sounded like a weird psych rock like punk band, almost like Chrome or something to me. And so like I thought like that would end it, but then when I went to make I really love that. My favorite loop of Doug's was the one that became Avarice edit. And Avarice is Doug's title, like that's what he called that piece. And I couldn't like get past the point. So this is the last song on the record. Like I couldn't get past that point with it, where I was like, "There's nothing I'm doing that's ever making me like lose track of time," or like the minute I changed it beyond the point that you hear it out on the record, which like is pretty much as Doug. Like that's the only one that's like that's what Doug played, and I added a little bit of delay. Like that's it. So I thought like there was something maybe to that, like some sort of like something in my subconscious was saying like you can't improve on this. Maybe you're not supposed to. And if like the whole point of this is to like inspire Doug to feel like he had made something and like his original compositions were at the core of it all and like there is truly like enough within himself and that's out in the world to like move forward, like maybe like that should be like the final message, even if it's not like I didn't say that to him directly. And then once we decided to put it out, I was like, well, that sort of works for the world as well. Like I can tell people like that last track is pretty much just Doug with me barely doing anything. So go pay and that should be enough proof that you should go pay attention to more of his music and go seek him out. So like I knew that one would be the end. Like I knew that would come I wanted that to come after Knuckles to Nostrils. So yeah, that's sometimes is my default. I've been wondering if I should break out like end with energy because I think a lot of times in terms like I usually compose for live sets when I do solo stuff, even though I was never going to play this live and I didn't like even think of it as a record. Sometimes I like the whole like open with energy, end with energy kind of a thing, but I can't tell if it's becoming a formula. I should stop indulging.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, maybe.
So speaking of the song titles, is that just like so you like for example you use Avarice because that was part of the description, but for the others was it just like was it a similar sort of thought process or is it just kind of like everything else where it's sort of based on the vibe or just phrases that are in the ether in your head and all that?
No, they're I mean I think they're different for each one, but I'd say most of them like well so like a good three of them I'd say are kind of based on the idea of do you know this book Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind? It's like a Zen text, but it's from like the 40s. John Cage was a fan of it. Anyway, it opens so like literally like I just like quote the introduction. It's like I've read it, but like I find like the introduction or whatever the first little thing is there is always like what stuck with me. So the guy who wrote it, when he came to America, he went to Yosemite and he was looking at a waterfall and he saw it as a metaphor for like life and death and or just like existence, you know what I mean? Like the idea of being part of the singularity and like, so this idea of like the river before it goes over the falls is like everything's together. And then when you go over the fall, it splits into all these individual droplets of water and they all have their own individual arc as they're falling, and that must be like, well, like how scary that must be, and like that. So that's essentially like when we all come into being out of the singularity, like that's our life, like as we're currently constructed. And then when you hit the bottom, like you're not like that droplet is gone, but you just become part of like everything again. Like you're back, like you're almost like back home in the river. And I would say having children, like that is one of the few things I have ever said to my kids that's made them not scared of death. So like it's become like a helpful metaphor around the house and helpful for me in thinking about death or things I'm scared of. But I also think of it in terms of like creativity a lot and personality traits. Like you can sort of shrink like if you shrink the time span of like the waterfall so that it's not your entire life or something, it's just like, well, there's like you're always some version of your like you could always be the river, and sometimes you just like can't see either side of it and you just feel like you're like a smaller version of yourself. And maybe like if you apply different practices or different mindsets, you might be able to zoom out just again, like within yourself and just be like, there's so much more to me. Like there's a river on either side of like this small version of myself that I've defined myself as that like I'm depressed about, like having so many limitations, like but maybe that's just there's like a greater amount, like a greater reservoir to pull from. And that was sort of the concept of the record, like when I gave it to Doug, like, or the concept of the present, when I was like, I know you're stuck on, I'm trying to decide like how much to reveal about like what I said to him, but I think he's okay with this. Like, I was like, I know you feel like you're stuck and like you might be a failure or like you haven't finished this thing, but like I haven't finished this thing either. And like, look at my bandmates and how much they accomplish. And like when I'm outside the band, I just kind of wait around and like, like it was almost a message for myself too. It was like there's more to you than you think, and like you're right now, you're just zooming in on this like small falling version of yourself. But like, look, you have already like made all this, like you put all this sound out into the world. You put it out into these individual droplets through like these Instagram videos, but like maybe they were part of a larger thing. Like maybe the river is like they just have to go over a different fall and then they'll like fall into a different configuration at the bottom. And it got a little like hippie. And so that was like a big like concept of the record. And Route 9 Falls is like honestly, I think it might have been destroyed by Hurricane Helene, but it's like a swimming spot in Asheville that Dave took me to. And it's just like a hike you can do where you just go up a series of waterfalls and there's swimming holes at each one of them. And it runs east to west. So like you're in the sunshine the entire day. And we've spent like a few of my son's birthdays there together. Like it's like a really special place to me. So that was like the idea of like that. And then Wood of the Watermen's from like that's like an old poem that's just like from around the Chesapeake Bay. I think it's speaking of beautiful swimmers, not the record label with the book. There's like an old book about crabs called Beautiful Swimmers. And I remember just sort of about like the crab culture of the Chesapeake Bay. It was written in the 1970s. And I know at one point there's some poem that's referenced in there called Wood of the Waterman. And, so it was the idea of like Doug and me both being like watermen, like maybe we're more fluid than we think we are, like we're not these like rigid calcified versions of ourselves that we've come to be like depressed about. So like the idea of water was, a kind of a theme throughout. And the painting that I chose by Jesse Paul Miller, the artist, like, it's not a coincidence. It's like sort of a figure of a person on a molecular level, sort of standing in within water, or coming out of the water. So a handful of the titles are are related to that idea. And then some other ones are like knuckles to nostrils is like a saying in the Narcan like harm reduction community, like which I'm a part of. Like I run a, you know, what Narcan is.
Yeah, I did get a few of them at last time we met.
Oh, cool. Right. Yeah, that's right. I was giving them out. So it's just like part of the training. Like if you're going to administer it to somebody, like you make sure your knuckles touch their nostrils. And I think it's like interesting how that can also be like a violent uh, phrase, like hitting someone in the face, but like also saving their life. And it just made me think about like the different ways you interact with people that are on the street or using drugs. You know, there's like a way to touch their nose that could either be violent or could be life-saving and filled with a lot of love, you know. And I know during the pandemic, like if you follow Doug's Instagram, he was, you know, very involved in the Black Lives Matter movement and, you know, the protests around George Floyd's death. And that got me involved in the harm reduction community. So I just thought of that because, you know, sort of like the rhythm of that song almost reminds me of like boxing or something. But just this idea that there's different ways of putting your fist to somebody's nose that could be filled with love and compassion.
I think it's really fitting that you know, you've taken like source material and then manipulated it into your own sort of like sonic palette, and it has that double meaning in the title. It kind of works perfectly because, you know, you've got that meaning where it is that sort of helping somebody, but then it does have that kind of punk energy that does give you that sort of like aggressive vibe to it, which totally works with the idea of just punching someone in the face as well. So
Yeah.
it's pretty cool. But
Yeah. I don't, you know, so I'm not a singer and I'm not a songwriter when it comes to lyrics or anything. So I have to like try and get all these ideas and like packed into a title. It's a little cerebral, but it's the best I can do, you know.
it's cool though. The water stuff at the beginning, it's deep, dude.
Yeah.
It's cool too because it reminds me a lot of I don't know if you guys have ever read the book or watched the movie Cloud Atlas, but there's a line at the end where I'm going to paraphrase, but he says something like, "Whatever you do, it's only going to amount to a drop of water in the ocean." And the guy goes, "But what is the ocean but a multitude of drops of water?" And I was like, "That's exactly it."
That is
So
it.
And you said that's the real true right there.
that's what I said.
That's another
exactly what
quote
I
from
said.
Cloud Atlas. Uh,
But it's interesting to hear you say that, Brian, because I feel like that echoes some of Josh's sentiments towards making music as well, where this is kind of like feeling of finding your maybe space within like the sea of music that you guys are putting out as a band. And that it leads me to the question like that you kind of touched on. Did you have you felt pressure, you know, as an artist in this sort of collective of musicians over the years to put out like your debut or put out music as a solo artist?
I don't know if it's like pressure necessarily because there's never really been pressure like within our fan community or at least like in a negative way. People are like, I want to hear what you have to do, but all of my compositions are a little like I mean again until like I'm working on like another one that I think I finished this week, but which like was had more intent of like I'm gonna write something. But otherwise it is still like a very like experiment. Like the process I described with the modular, it's like it's more like a meditation practice to me. Like I'm not like the other guys when it like the way they describe sometimes like, well, I just have this thing in my head. Like I don't know where it came from. And now I need to like grab a guitar or sit down at the piano and like work it out, you know. And I hear a lot of songwriters I'm friends with talk about things that way. And I was just like, that's never happened to me. Like, I mean, like sometimes I get like a melody in my head that I hum, but like I don't like it's not like the kind of thing where like then quickly like words form or like I'm just like it doesn't happen to me. And that's never been like a I mean, everybody might like to write a song like that sounds really fun or be able to like express your thoughts in ways where I'm not just like I have to figure out like a title and then explain it in a podcast. Like it'd be I guess it'd be a cool skill, but like you know, I'm cool with like the know thyself vibe, I think. And I was just like, if that doesn't happen to me, I'm not gonna like beat myself up that it doesn't happen to me. I'd say it's a bit more of like the pressure. Any pressure I felt was like, I feel like I want to be part of like a conversation or a continuum of just music in general, like even outside of Animal Collective, of just like the the experiences that like made me feel alive when I was a kid, like going to shows or hearing a record, like I owe something to that. And also like I'm very fortunate. Like I really want to like if I was just making my like noise music or sound collages, I would be doing it at night or on the weekends because I would have a day job, you know? And like the fact that like Noah and Dave valued whatever like delayed whale noises I stuck on Merriweather that have like allowed, you know, while they did like their fucking genius singing all day long, like, you know, that's like allowed me to live like a pretty charmed life in terms of being able to make music all day. And I'm just like, I feel like a responsibility to, like, I'd say after that or like, you know, into the teens or something, because we were touring so much. And I always felt like I'm sort of paying that back by like being up there on stage and bringing energy to their songs. And like, that's like that's like, there's an honor in facilitating that kind of a stuff, you know? Once we started touring less and everybody had kids but then like again I had this like luxury of having free time. I felt pressure to be like you got to do something with it. And you know, I did a lot of stuff kind of in private. I mean, it was really Dave was the person that was just like just fucking do it. Like the first time he asked me to actually like write a solo set and perform it, he was like, do you want to go on tour with me? And I was like, to like sell t-shirts, like you need me to like sell the t-shirts. And he was like, no, dummy, like just fucking do it. Like like you can do it. And I was like, I'll give it a shot, you know. You know, that was like in the mid-teens somewhere. And so like that it was that kind of a pressure. It was just like I've been given a gift of time and space. And I think maybe I have something to say, even if it's not like a pop song. And it just feels like there's so many people, even again in like the noise music world, that would be like I would kill for 8 hours a day to be able to do that. I felt like pressure to do something with that or honor that, I would say. Does that make sense? I would hate to speak for Josh, but I know Josh pretty well. I think that's a little different. Whereas he, I think, like is like David Noah, where he does hear things in his head and things come to him, and he has a lot, and he like could express it in a more like classic music singer songwriter kind of way. And I think like for him, the pressure was different. Of like I have like a backlog of ideas, and I need to allow them to break through. Whereas I am a little bit more like I just have time and energy and that needs to be put towards like being in service of something, you know?
Yeah, you're always something is always happening or bubbling underneath the surface in the ancosphere. And it's always nice when you can branch out from, you know, the I don't want to say bigger, but you know, more notable releases from like AV and Panda and all that. But of course, what else is Animal Collective if not looking towards the future in all different aspects? So we're gonna, I guess, transition to that. We'll start with Doug, since you guys, I mean, worked together, quote unquote. You are both credited on this album. Have you
Mhm.
guys talked about working on anything together in the future,
I mean, I would
unrelated to
love
this?
to. I would love to. It'd be great. We're gonna play a show together. We're gonna do a he's actually like I just sent him like a quick mock-up of a flyer we could post on Instagram. And I think he's been texting me while I've been on with you guys, maybe about changes. I don't know. But we were like maybe at that show we could play together. I don't know if we will, because like I've, you know, this other thing, it's weird because I've only like done it live probably like 20 times, maybe less. But you know, again, the set, Greg, that you heard me play in Texas is like something I wrote to try and again challenge myself was like could I write a record and like and actually like compose it, like play it the same every time, which I wasn't definitely doing in Texas like a year ago. I was still trying to improvise and figure out what parts I liked, but I have like a set now that when I play it, it's like a written thing. So I don't know if we'll play together on that, but yeah, I would love to. I think, you know, I have at this point, it's weird to say, but it's because Animal Collective's like not planning on touring anytime soon, or making like a big full length anytime soon because everybody's like on different schedules. I have like so many projects up in the air that it's like starting to and it's ironic because like I don't feel like they matter so much in terms of like needing to space them out, but like they are at this point almost like folding on top of each other. And I wouldn't like talk about all the projects because I don't really know what they'll turn into. But I think I'm in the middle of like 6 records right now, including Shaw Deal, because it's not like totally out yet. So my plate's kind of full at the moment, in a good way. I mean, nothing's making me any money, but it's like I said, it's about at this point, kind of honoring the time that's been afforded to me with effort, you know.
Well, we'll
Cool.
expect that album in 2027. I'm just kidding.
Well, no, I mean the hurdy-gurdy one, the hurdy-gurdy one's done. And I gave it to Drag City. I mean, I finished it this week, but like I played it for them when it was like not mastered yet. Um, and they were a little like, dude, like, please, like, we're already putting out one of your records. We'd rather you just focus on that and maybe like bring this to us after like that record's like at least like on the shelves. So I don't know, that one's done.
You're used
And
to
also,
Domino being like, anything you got, bring it, hand it over. We don't know
no,
when it's going to
no,
come
I'm
out, but we'll take it.
definitely not used to that with Domino at all. Well, I that's not true. They will take it. Domino will put out anything by us. It's just a matter of like, will it be like a year from
Right.
now, or they definitely like care more about like, I think they're aware that the music world at large is not you guys. They're like, especially when it comes to press, and I know this even from trying to get press for a Shaw deal. It's sort of like there's a like one Animal Collective thing almost counts as like the Animal Collective thing for a lot of places. For they're like, our readers don't need that much of you. Like, it's not 2009 anymore. Our readers don't need that much of you guys. We don't have that much space for you guys. And Domino is acutely aware of that. I think more so than Drag City is. So you know yeah, Domino. I mean, Domino doesn't really want my solo stuff. They're this is just not the label where they're like, we don't do stuff with this kind of stuff. So I don't even I kind of tell them about it as a courtesy, like, hey, this other label wants to do this thing just in honor of the last 20 years. Do you want it? And they've generally been like, no, good luck.
Wow.
All right.
So, looking into the future, then, so you've got a lot of music kind of stockpiled there that will presumably see the light of the day at some point. In terms of Animal Collective, you already kind of talked about it. There's no big album planned or tours. Is there anything from the Animal Collective camp? I know you've got Panda Bear just released Fairy Lady, which you feature on. Are there any other sort of Animal Collective camp releases that are planned throughout this year outside of a Shaw deal and Sinister Grift?
I mean, Fields is going to turn 20 this year, and we've talked about like mining through like our live archives and why not to see if we could put together a cool thing of that. We've always liked the idea of doing like a radio sessions record. Like we love radio sessions by other bands, and we've always loved, well, I wouldn't say that's not always the best experience, but the BBC sessions or Sirius XM sessions, things like that. So there's that. And that's sort of like on my to-do list for the band, is present something to the band that like they might, like, hey, this could be like our radio sessions comp. They keep reminding me that I'm supposed to be doing that for them. So there's that. And then yeah, I would, again, there's not like I don't know like what terminology to use always. It's not like in like the record label world, you would call it like a contractual record, which means like we turned it into Domino and we're like, hey, we need like a big budget to record this because it's going to require travel, and then we plan on touring it, and we'll do the press. Like, there's like, those are called like contractual records. And then there's like our kind of, again, not like lower stakes to us, but lower stakes, I'd say, in terms of like the sort of like industry energy and money that's put behind it. That kind of stuff is sort of always going on in the band. But that also means like we're a little bit more casual with the timeline of it. So I wouldn't want to talk about any of that kind of stuff because like I never know what's going to turn into something or not. But when we took the time off in 2022 from that tour, and then we knew Isn't It Now was going to come out in 2023, and I'm pretty sure, Greg, you and I talked about this in Denton, and we've talked about it in other places publicly. Like, it was a shame. Like, we knew we weren't going to tour for that record, which like I almost forget it came out sometimes. And or like I think of it as coming out when Time Skiffs came out because like that group of songs are so linked to me and we were done, isn't it now, even before Time Skiffs came out. And then it just like it had to wait for a while. So like in some ways it feels like it's been forever since Animal Collective worked on stuff. And then I remind myself like it's just been a year, or I guess now like a little over a year since we put out our last full length. And I don't even know how many people like know it. I mean, like granted, I'm like 45 and I hang out with a lot of people in DC who are in their 40s who have day jobs and they're like, what are you up to? And they don't know that we've put out anything in a decade. Or when Steve Gunn and I toured, we just did like a little mini tour in September, and a woman came out to see me, and she literally said like, "I was a big fan of your former project," and I was like, "The cassettes I did," and she was like, "No, I." And then you could see like in her face that she realized like maybe Animal Collective's still together, and she was like, "Oh, no, I'm sorry. I mean, maybe it's still like an ongoing project." Um, so yeah, it's like I'm in such a weird like world of not being around musicians or being in New York or like around the center of it that it's hard for me to even know. But to us, like the time off felt natural, and then like everybody got on different schedules a little bit, and now everybody's like been pretty psyched on the solo stuff they're making. I think for the first time, like because now I do it, it's like all four of us like have things in various states and it's just been like, again, we talk every day. We work on things remotely again that like we're not sure what they'll turn into, like always, but I just don't have like a like that moment hasn't happened, like we knew when we did Music Box in 2018, like that this is gonna turn into a record. Like we haven't we just like I've seen Noah once since we canceled that tour, like I'm gonna see him when he comes to America for the Sinister Grift tours, but it's just like we haven't had that time yet. Like that's it's just like everybody's like synced up and then like something clicks and we're like everybody's like, all right, it's go time. Like everybody's psyched and we're all on the same page and like, we're all I've used that dumb, I mean it's not dumb, but like when I say it, it sounds dumb to me. The river waterfall analysis I've used a lot. Like to me, like Animal Collective is the same thing. Like, and I've said this to the other guys a lot. I'm just like, when we're together, we're like a river, and then we hit a waterfall, and like we're all falling at different rates and in our own little arcs, and eventually we come back to the river. And I'd say right now we're all still like in our own arcs of the waterfall. So that's where the band is.
True
Well,
say.
I mean, speaking of like DC and not being around the music scene, you are in a side project out there, right? The
That's true. I'm actually really,
JMB.
yeah, I'm really involved in the DC music scene, but that's like improv. And, there's a place called Rhizome that's just around the corner from my studio space that like I'm a part of that community. But yeah, motherfuckers, JMB and company. That's, yeah, again, I am in another band now, I guess.
Well, it's funny because
Where'd
we
that
always
band name
joke
come
about
from?
how like, oh yeah, go ahead. Where does that motherfuckers?
Yeah.
Where was the inspiration behind that?
Um, behind the name or behind the band?
Well, the
I guess
name, yeah,
both, but we'll start with the
yeah.
name. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess it's the same thing, really. My friend Mark, who plays bass and guitar, I'm the youngest one in the band. The other guys are like in their 50s and maybe 60. I don't know. But my friend Mark, who like we just know each other from like record fairs and record collecting. We're both big Thinking Fellers fans. So like his wife overheard me talking about Thinking Fellers at a party once and was like, my husband doesn't have any other friends that like in DC that know that band. Like you and my husband are gonna be friends. So we became friends and then he told me that this drummer, Jim Thompson, had moved to DC. He grew up around here and was looking for people to jam with. And Jim was in Guar in the 80s. I don't know if you know the band
Oh,
Guar,
yeah.
Of course we do.
the one you're thinking of. And he was like the original Hans Sphincter or something. And he also played in this SST band called Alternatives in the 80s. And so Jim was like looking for people to play with, and he wanted to do an instrumental rock trio. And Mark knew was friends with both of us independently and was like, maybe we could do like some kind of a Tony Conrad and Faust thing with like me on bass, Jim on drums, and Brian, you can play hurdy-gurdy as like as if you're Tony Conrad. And it was just for one show. And he was and then we started talking about like we got together to jam and it sounded a little bit more. We're way more like rock and roll, like krautrock a little bit, a little bit. I don't even know anymore what it is, but it's just like an instrumental rock power trio of hurdy-gurdy bass and drums. And the idea came of referencing a song or a record that we all liked, and somebody referenced like a Can song, and I was like, that's too obvious. But do you know the band Soul Caravan?
I might have heard the name. I don't know them
Like
though.
one of the lesser known German bands of the 70s. It's spelled like XHOL. I heard of them actually because we used to play this like nerdy game in the van in Animal Collective where to pass the time, like, it was before smartphones or anything. You had to say a band name, and then the next person in the van had to say a band that started with the last letter of that. And like if you could say something with an X, that was always hard because there weren't that many options. But then Noah, I think it was Noah, and he didn't even listen to it, but he was like, I just remember this CD at Other Music, and it had this word on it, and it was like Zoll Caravan. Anyway, they have a record called the record in German would read to somebody as like Motherfuckers Incorporated, but like, incorporated in German, or at least at the time they like their version of like INC or LLC is GmbH and Company. And so like I like the GmbH, I was like, well, Jim's name is, if we change that to J, then it's like motherfuckers, Jim, Mark, Brian and Company. So it's a dorky record collector reference of.
That's
And again,
awesome,
I
man.
thought we actually got into we had a band meeting the other night. We're in the middle of making a record. We're going to mix it next week, and we were having a meeting about it. And we were talking about the like more in a theoretical way, like when is it cool to like appropriate something? And I was like, I think it's cooler if you just make up your own thing rather than like always like appropriating like for album art or whatever. And they pointed out that like I had chosen this band name from this record title. And I was like, well, dude, I thought this band was gonna last for one show. Like I literally just thought we were playing one show together. If you had told me we'd be playing together like a year later and it'd be super fun and we'd be making a record, I probably would have thought of something different. But
Yeah,
I
well,
like it
speaking of
actually.
that, you guys just played a show on Sunday, right?
Saturday, yeah.
Saturday, yeah. How did that
Yeah,
go?
great. I didn't think anyone was gonna show up. It was freezing. It was after New Year's. One of the bands canceled. And it was packed. It was probably like, yeah, our best or second best show. I thought it's usually always improvised, but at this point, like we've done it enough that we kind of know, like, oh, when you play that riff, I play this, and like that's how our record kind of came about. It's sort of like the greatest hits of our improvisations over the last year. We just then went into the studio and did it for like 2 hours, and I've been spending the last like few weeks trying to put it together into like a single LP. But
Yeah,
yeah,
well,
so
even the little bits we've heard is pretty cool. Like even just the snippets, like you can just imagine anything that comes out of a jam session like that is always going to have like those sort of positive, you know, team building vibes to it, I guess.
how have you heard it? Do people like post videos or?
Well, weren't there a couple tracks released on Bandcamp?
Yeah, I think one of my bandmates made a Bandcamp page without telling the rest of us.
Ah, no, actually, I hacked your hard drives.
Yeah.
So I have all those 6 projects you're working on right
Well,
now.
Josh asked me the other night. He was like, "Why didn't you tell me about the show?" And I was like, I don't know. It's like always, I'm always weird about improv shows because like you might invite someone to something that's like not a good one.
Mm.
But I was like, "How'd you even know about it?" And he said he saw something on Reddit or whatever. And I didn't know if they had posted videos or whatever. I thought I was the youngest person in the building at that show, so I was surprised that there could have been an Animal Collective fan there. Maybe it was an older Animal Collective fan. I don't know. But yeah, anyway, that's the band. I like being in a band called the Motherfuckers too. It makes me laugh
It's
every time.
cool.
Yeah,
It's cool. It definitely like grabs attention really quickly, so it's got that working for it right off the bat.
yeah.
Okay, so I got one more work question for you before we wrap this up here, Brian. It's the same question I asked Josh back in 2000, well, 2023.
Is
Yeah, it was.
oh,
I keep forgetting we're
when
not
you
in
were interviewing
2024.
him solo, or when we had him on for Linear
The
Beat?
solo one. Yeah.
Okay.
So that was around the isn't it now? So anyway, the question is desert island question. You're trapped on the desert island. You can only bring one solo record from each of your Animal Collective band members,
Wait,
bandmates. What's it gonna be?
it has to be that from the solo ones.
Yeah. So like one solo record, and it's a little bit harder with obviously Josh has a bit more of a limited discography to choose from, but
Do you are you gonna edit out the time it's gonna take me to think, or
yes,
Yeah.
yes, you take your time.
I can't just choose an Animal Collective record because I know what that would be.
Well, I'm intrigued to hear that too.
He's gonna say the
I
Keep
would,
EP. He just doesn't want to. He's being
That's
shy.
a good way if you say the
yeah.
Keep EP, you kind of encompass
But then you
everything.
only bring one tape to your desert island.
You've
It's
only
gonna
got
get
four
old really
songs, yeah.
fast. It's only 12 minutes.
No, I would say these days I've really been thinking that and it's partly because I don't play on it. But if I had to pick one Animal Collective record, I'd probably pick Sung Tongs. I really think that one's hard to top in a lot of ways. Not like internally, but just like my record's really never gotten old, I think. And again, partly it's maybe because I don't play on it, so I didn't have to play it live a million times or anything like that. But sometimes it's a pretty special record, I think. So I'd probably bring that before I brought anything else. So Josh, yeah, Sleep Cycle. It'd be cool if I could bring some live recordings of his. I really like Golden Chords when he plays it live. He's asked me to play on it. The last few times we've played like solo sets together, he's asked me to actually like play hurdy gurdy on it because it's in like the natural key of the hurdy gurdy, and it's always really like fun and emotional to play. I really love doing that. And then when he plays Wide Eyed solo, I think it's also like pretty top tier. We started playing it like I saw him do it, and I was like, we should play it in Animal Collective, like how you play it when you play solo, like just where you strum the guitar and there's like a groove. And we started doing that a little bit like in 2022. And I hope like if we get back to touring, that stays like in the touring lineup, like in that version. I guess that's not like his solo song, but like he plays it solo.
Hmm.
And I think it's quite different than the Centipede Hurts version in a way I like. Dave and Noah are harder. For Noah, think I'd go with Grim Reaper. Um,
And I should interrupt you real quick. Today is the 10th
Hmm.
anniversary of Panda Bear Meets the Grim Reaper.
oh, is
Just
it?
yeah,
I had
Yep.
no idea.
January
Yeah,
9th,
nice.
2015.
Yeah, I felt like that was like a culmination of like almost like the end of that sound of Noah. Like I feel like between Person Pitch and Tomboy and even before that, I was like, oh, that's like the pinnacle of like all the ideas now sound synthesized into something unique and like yeah, really like the apex of that era. And then Dave, I mean, I guess everybody's stuff is so different, but I really hear like differences in Dave's, and he's probably the toughest for me to pick. So we have Down There, Eucalyptus,
Hmm.
Slasher Flicks, Cows, and Sevens, right? It's
Hmm.
like those five things.
You
And
could say
Spirit's
Pull
like
Hair Rub Eye, but
yeah,
Hmm.
or any of the terrestrial tones things.
True, it's
Uh,
true.
I guess if I'm on a desert island, this might be cheating. If like
Go for it.
if you take like the setting that you're in, I think you have to go with Eucalyptus.
Yeah, it's a good point. It definitely fits the island vibes a lot more, and it's long,
I was
so
gonna
you
say
have
yeah,
like a
Yeah.
lot of
solid hour.
yeah.
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
Just do that
But,
24 times in a day. You'll get out of there eventually.
Awesome. Yeah,
So
those are good
I have a
choices.
couple more of the future questions, and then we'll let you go. We talked about Jetty last time you and I were in person, and
hmm.
Jordan and I were actually able to see it. Um, and it's interesting that it is like the most minimal score that you guys have or at least in the finished product from what we heard. Do
Yeah.
you guys have any more projects like scoring projects in the future? I know Josh has that doc that he scored that's premiering at Sundance at the end of the month. But have you
Yeah.
guys
Well, that's narrative
anything
actually.
else?
It's not a doc. Yeah, that's narrative. Yeah. So while he was doing, I mean, I never know what you're like allowed to say. It's nothing even like mind blowing. But at the same time that he went to Lisbon to work with Noah on Sinister Griff, we got like a soundtrack. It was another documentary to score. And so Dave and I did that. It touches on like it was because of the inspection and this documentary they were doing a documentary on some stuff about the Afghan war, and they were like, we're not, I don't think we're going to pursue this angle of like our scoring career, but after the inspection there was like a some people were psyched of like if you're making a military film but you don't want a military score, like these guys prove they can do it with the inspection. And So we got asked to do this documentary, and it was right after Dave and I had done the tour together, like the aviary geologist tour. And so we were like, yeah, let's do a project together. And Josh couldn't do it because he had agreed to go help Noah with Sinister Grift. And then when he came back, Dave and I were still like on that score, but like it was kind of in the second half of it, and everything had kind of already been like demoed out and stuff. And then so that allowed Josh, then our friend Albert, to to score his movie. So I have no idea when this documentary is coming out that Dave and I scored. I really like the score we did, and some of the rejected things we were like, I can't believe they rejected that. Like we should just turn that into something on our own. So, but I'm not even sure what that'll be called, and I don't know when it's gonna, if and when it'll even come out. So,
Well, I think I
It's
got him
interesting.
confused because we talked about that one last time.
Yeah, but it's
I can
interesting
never
because
keep
on
track.
the ASCAP ASCAP website, there's a track called Afghan Papers that's credited to you guys.
really,
Yeah.
well, that's it. I guess. I mean, but I thought that title, we didn't title anything that. So I don't know what that is, but
Hmm.
so there's a book called Afghan Papers. This writer at the Washington Post, like, it's kind of funny how it's like not a bigger story. It was this big like expose in the Washington Post, and like you mentioned it to people, and they're like, ah. But it's kind of about how like we knew from the spring of 2002 that like the war in Afghanistan was pointless and unwinnable. And like it really just existed then for the next 20 years to make people rich and like justify people keeping their jobs. And, like the Washington Post got like tons of these memos through like a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit where you can just see these internal memos about how ridiculous that entire debacle was. So that is the basis for the documentary that we worked on. And it was hard to work on it it was like a 4 month job. And like, yeah, sometimes you're like lining up like a drum beat with someone getting shot. Like we had access to kind of crazy footage, and then you just like by the end of it, it was just like I'm just like in a bad mood and angry. Like,
Yeah,
it was a weird
it's
project to
tricky.
work on. So
Is that how you always work on your scores? Is with the the cut or like images from the finished product, or do you sometimes just write on spec and then see how that lines up?
it's a little bit of both, and I think that depends on like the member of Animal Collective you're talking about. Like, we all have different strengths, and we usually tell filmmakers that when we go into the project. Like if you're looking for something really like song structure and almost like classical in form and stuff, like, Dave can like write stuff like that really quickly, but it doesn't always mean it's going to line up with like cuts, and then it that can be problematic because like sometimes you'll ask Dave like, why'd you change it here? And he's like, the song needed to change. And it's like, yeah, but the film hadn't changed yet. And he does, like, he's a very organic musician, you know what I mean? Whereas like then, like for someone like me, it's like I look at the grid of like the shots and how the scene's going to play out, and I really just like think about like how can I get from point A to point B and what works here and what do I want to like line up with a certain shot or a certain cut. And I mean, I think it's weird. My wife pointed out, she was like, well, it makes sense that the two of you work together that way because like that's sort of been like when Dave and Noah, traditionally, and Josh, a little bit more recently, like when they bring songs to the band, like I'm already given a roadmap that I have to follow to write parts to. So to me, it's like very similar to work in Animal Collective, where I think for, and like Noah's just like not interested in it. He's like, I can't, like what comes out of my head comes out of my head, and I can't like follow like a thing that somebody's already giving me to follow. Um, so yeah, and again, we're very honest with the filmmakers, like about that's how we work. Like somebody might come up with a spark, and then like someone like me will do more of like the really specific sound design and the shot by shot kind of when things need to be scored that way. It'll be me. Also, if it's like a darker, more experimental kind of vibe, it'll be me. Something more like sad will be Josh. Like it's like we kind of tell him that stuff.
Well, it's always interesting to see how, yeah, like those different strengths can be applied and, show up in the different solo efforts or collectively when you guys make an album together. Well, Brian, we really appreciate you joining us today. A lot of great answers, so thank you for that. A Shaw Deal is out on Drag City January 31st. I believe it's still able to order on vinyl or pre-order. but it'll also be available digitally on streaming platforms everywhere. So if you guys love Animal Collective and you're like, I got this money burning a hole in my pocket, I need to spend it on a record, go hit up Drag City and they'll take care of you. I can't wait for my copy to get here so I can have the art and everything. And it's just, it's never not an exciting time to be an Animal Collective fan. And the beginning of this year is no different. So once again, thanks for joining us, Brian. We really appreciate it. And we
Thanks
hope
for
to have you
talking.
on in the future.
Thanks for listening to the record.
All right.
Anytime.
Well, stay warm up there and take it easy.
Yep, you guys too. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Go.
All right, have a good
See ya.
one.
See ya.
Bye.